This is Woodside Church Sunday.
Well, good morning, everyone. As you can see, I've got my nativity auditions after we finished at church. I must admit, I walked to church this morning. I was carrying my stuff, and I got some very strange looks from some people who must have thought it was the wrong time of year. But anyway, so I'll crack on, because obviously we're all here for the cake sale. But anyway, I'm carrying on our series on Psalm 23, and I've been given verse 5 today. And my title is Fearless in the Valley. So given all the messages we've had about fearlessness and where we bring our fears, it's funny how God can steer a service. So, shall we start by reading Psalm 23, at least as far as the bit that I'm concerned with, and then I'll leave the rest to everyone else. So, Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green pastures, meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid. For you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect me and comfort me. And we'll pause it there for a bit. So, that's the verse that I've been given. Now let's just start with some of the essential things. When we are talking about valleys here, this is a psalm about our suffering and the challenges and the trials that we face in life. And the first thing I want to just kind of get across is really the inevitable bit, because the first line of this verse is even when I walk. It's not if, when. It's an inevitability. So we can't sugarcoat this and think that, oh yeah, we've got a life of sunshine and rainbows. It's not really how it goes. These valleys are inevitable. But actually, even though we face these, we have a God with us that enables us to be fearless. But that's the line that's key here. I will not be afraid. But I don't know about you, but sometimes when I see that verse, I think, well, it's easy enough to say that. It's easy enough to say it, but putting that into practice is significantly harder. So it's a bit like we're in GCSE season at work. I'm an English teacher, and when the kids are nervous, and I say, "Oh, don't worry," they kind of look at me as if to go, "Of course I'm going to worry." Like it's easy for you to say, sat there, but actually the worry is very real. So, what I'm going to be discussing today is how is it then that we can build ourselves up to this fearlessness? How is it the next time we see a valley, better take that out of my pocket. It's relevant, I promise. It wasn't just attacking people on my way. Anyway, yeah, I was thinking, what's blocking my knee? But there we go, discovered the problem. So we're going to be looking at how this reverse shows us how to be fearless when we inevitably face all of this challenge. So the first thing I'd like to do is actually tell you a bit of a story. So I've mentioned that I'm a teacher already, and for as long as I'm relatively free as I am without a family of my own to be responsible for, one of the things I like to do is I jump in on as many of the residential trips, camps, all of that sort of thing that I can. And our school, quite fortunately for me, because it means I get to get involved in it, runs a Duke of Edinburgh scheme. Hands up if you've done a Duke of Edinburgh award? Okay, a few of us. So if you're not sure what D of E is, ask these people when we get to the end. But in short, it's an opportunity for young people to go on an expedition where sometimes they'll be walking, sometimes they'll be canoeing, kayaking. They have to do all the navigation for themselves. They're not allowed phones. And every year they have a practice, and then they have their real one, and the school does this. And I love to go along. So even last weekend, it was their practice run. So I was camping out by a Danish camp, and they're cooking all their own food on trangiers. My favourite quote was, someone said, "Oh, does anyone have a thermometer?" And I was like, what for? And so he said, "Oh, I want to see if my water's boiling." So this is the level. This is the level of unpreparedness we deal with on these things. But there is a particular group that we take every year, and it's always a small group, that are allowed to take the D of E as a replacement for one of their GCSE options. So, and we take them every year, and we do our practice camping on the school field, and then we go and do our real one. And last year I went along with this group, and to be honest, I did it because it was a day just driving around in the minibus with one of my colleagues. We got to just chat and wait for them at each of the checkpoints. But because of the nature of the group we had, as a little bit of a reasonable adjustment is what we'd call it, they were allowed to have a phone on them, which we could see tracking. So we could see precisely where they were, and they could call us and only us if they needed to. And it was a great weekend. And of course, for staff, we have to work really hard. So you can see there's a picture about to come up. You can see what the day's like for me. There I am. So this was waiting at a checkpoint while the young people are walking. I got such a sunburn doing that. And in fact, the teacher who took the picture of me, he has a folder of pictures of me asleep on school trips. It's not good. But so we're sat there, and I'm asleep. We're just waiting for the next bit of news. And every now and then, we're looking at our phone to see where the group is and how far they've progressed. Now, it's quite normal for them to stop for 10 minutes, every hour or so. But once they hit 20, and we thought, okay, it's midday. Okay, lunchtime. Then they'd not moved for 40 minutes. Okay, something's a bit awry here. Hit 50, and we thought, right, we're going to ring them. So we called them up, and I should probably change his name, shouldn't I? Let's call him, I'm going to call him Brian. I ring up Brian, and I said, right, Brian, you've not moved. What's going on? And he said, we're stuck. We're stuck. We can't go anywhere. So what's going on? Right, do you know your route? He said, oh, yeah, we know the route. Are you sure? Have you checked your map? I was, oh, no, I know the route. I can even see the gate. I know the route. So what's the problem then? And he said, no, we're stuck. What's the problem? There's cows, sir. There's cows. And they were in this field, and there were cows there that were on their path right through to their gate, and they just rooted themselves for the best part of an hour because they were petrified of walking any further. And I said, right, hang on, show me these cows. He switches to video view. These cows are miles away. Like, their gate's here, and the cows are all the way over there. And yet, I was telling them, it's all right. Like, it's a public footpath. There wouldn't be cows on there if they were dangerous. I promise you, it's going to be fine. But they were having absolutely none of it. They were not prepared to move. So while the panic is increasing on the phone, and we're starting to hear more voices, and one's going, but the cow's moving. Oh, and all of this is going on. We hear a voice in the background over the loudspeaker. I thought, ooh, that's an adult voice. Thinking, who have they just stumbled across in their paths? So then the teacher in me is going, all right. We need to make sure they're safe. This could be anybody. And we say, Brian, can you switch us to loudspeaker, please? Because we can hear him talking. And then we hear this guy saying, oh, are you guys their teachers? I was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. And he said, oh, I'm the farmer. This is my field. He said, what's the problem? And then the kids are explaining, oh, there's cows there. We need to go that way. And he says to us, oh, don't worry, guys. He said, I'll take them through the field. It's all right. And then instantly, those kids calmed down, and we could start seeing that tracker move, and they made their way out of this field. Now, I was thinking, I've not told you anything that farmer didn't tell you. I told you that the cows are fine. I've told you you can just walk up through the gate. They weren't hearing it from me, but they would hear it from the farmer. Which begs the question, what's the difference then between me and this farmer who's running the land? What's the difference? So the first one was this. The farmer, I might have put the slides in a slightly funny order, but the farmer has power and authority. When I say to the kids, don't worry about the cows, they're harmless, they say, sir, all you know is about Shakespeare. What do you know about cows? My voice doesn't carry any authority at all. None. They weren't going to hear it from me. But if they hear it from the farmer, the guy who has power and authority in that land, they're going to take his word for it. And they're going to feel comforted by that, and that will empower them to move their way through the field. So that's the first thing. He's got power and authority. But the second key difference, the second one is that he's actually there. He's present. He's with them by their side. Whereas I'm just a floating voice over the phone, and if they knew I'd been asleep all day, that probably made them even less confident. So what we see then is the impact that it has to enable us to be fearless, when we've got someone by our side who has power and authority, but also is very tangibly there with us, that has an actual presence that we can feel, and it empowers us to move our way through. So with that in mind, the key thing that I think makes the difference between just a standard shepherd, that's this farmer, me as a teacher, as a guide, and what we see in this psalm is the rod and the staff, although I said those the wrong way around. The rod and the staff. It's the rod and the staff. Now, I went shopping on Amazon. It's more crooked than crook, in all honesty, but it will do the trick. So, in short, this rod is a defensive weapon, and this staff is for guidance. It's how a shepherd would interact with the sheep. So let's start with the rod, and I'll park this there. Let's start with the rod then. Now, when David was writing this psalm, what a shepherd would have would not be a police baton. Callum wouldn't let me have a real one. it wouldn't have been a police baton. It would have been a sapling, a bit of wood that they've carved to create a really heavy lump at one end, basically a club. And what we see from David, this club was used by shepherds in a defensive capacity, but against some pretty ferocious threats. Like, we're not just talking cows in fields. But David, it said of David in Samuel that David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the field, I went after it, struck it, and released the sheep from its mouth." So this rod is a capable weapon in the hands of a shepherd. Cows would be no sweat. Lions and bears, different story. And yet David has it in hand. So it's a defensive weapon. It's there to protect us. So with that in mind, this rod is representation of God's power and authority. So just as the farmer in D.of.E. had power and authority over his field, this rod represents that while we're in this darkest valley, God has power and authority there too. And when we know this, that's where some of our comfort and our fearlessness can come from. So it's a symbol of God's power. But second, it reminds us that God's word has power and authority as well. Just as when God says to us, "You can be fearless, we can trust it," just as the farmer says to the kids, "Oh, don't worry, you can be fearless, the cows are no harm," we can trust that too. So God's word has power, and we can use that defensively too. So it's a bit like in the story of Jesus in the desert. When Jesus is faced with challenge, the first thing he goes to is the scripture to back himself up. So it's like he's faced with challenge, he gets the word out, he says, "I can deal with this." It's something we can lean upon. It's something we can defend ourselves with, no matter what the world throws at us. God's word has got power in that situation. It's not just talk, he's got the power to back it up. And that's what's key with this rod. But then thirdly, I can't count. This is why I don't teach maths. Thirdly, this rod reminds us of our own weakness. Now, sheep are pretty useless animals. They're pretty defenseless. So when we think of something that's meek and peaceful, sheep is always the first thing we go to. They are helpless by themselves. The fact God needs a rod is testament to the fact that actually we can't defend ourselves. We're hopeless. We need God in that situation. And when I was researching a little bit for this sermon, preach, whatever you want to call it, I was directed towards this book, and it's called A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23. And it's written by a guy called W. Philip Keller. It's a fantastic book. He's a shepherd from East Africa. And it's him reading Psalm 23 and writing about it from the perspective of someone who knows sheep and he knows what the job of a shepherd is. And something that he said was another purpose of a rod was part of inspecting sheep. So if you've got sheep, obviously they're covered in wool, it can be quite hard to see what's wrong with them. Because there can be all sorts of things up with their skin, with their body, that the wool just hides. It pulls the wool over their eyes. Hey. But, yeah, thank you. So this rod, what the shepherd would do, he'll stop the sheep in its tracks, and then with his hands inspect what's up with that sheep. We'll go and find the ailments, find where it's unclean, find where the fleece has its problems, go and uncover all of those weaknesses. And in our lives, we need God to do that for us. Because sometimes when we're facing a fearful situation, no matter where that might be, we like to say, "Oh, I'm fine, I've got this, it's all right." I know that "I'm fine" is my default response to a lot of things. Yeah, it could be something I'm petrified about. Someone will say, "How are you all right? Are you fine?" Yeah, absolutely. Like even this morning outside for the preach, "Oh, how are you feeling?" "Oh, great. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. I'm not nervous at all good. Just looking forward to cake." But sometimes this rod can be used to expose the fact that we need God's help. And when the staff is for guidance, if we want to be comforted by God, if we want to see his guidance, first we need to accept that we need it, rather than going off on our own paths. Because just as sheep can be stubborn, and you can direct them onto the right path as many times as you like, but they're still going to get their distraction caught and they're going to wander off in the wrong direction, we have that tendency too. So unless we're prepared to have God convict us of the fact that we need his guidance with this rod, then we're not going to feel that comfort when we're in a fearless valley. We're not going to feel that fearlessness when we're in the darkest valley. Hey, we got there eventually. So, let's go a bit further forward. That takes us on to the staff. So if the rod is defensive, the staff is interactive. When the shepherd wants to interact with his sheep, the staff is the thing he uses. His hands don't get involved, but this is the thing that he's going to make physical contact with the sheep with. When it's going off the wrong way, hook it around the neck, redirect it. So it's interactive. And this, bit like the farmer is there with us in the GV story, then that made the difference. The staff represents God's presence. He doesn't just speak to us through the word, like, here's your Bible, off you go, see you when you die. It's not like that. He's there with us in the meantime. He's present, and he interacts with us, and he steers us, and he guides us, just as a shepherd can do with his staff. So it represents his personal presence with us. I want to share with you just a short little extract, actually, from that Philip K. Keller book that, again, helped me to understand this psalm that little bit better. And he wrote the following. I think we have it on the screen. Sometimes I have been fascinated to see how a shepherd will actually hold his staff against the side of some sheep that is a special pet or favorite, simply so that they are in touch. They will walk along this way almost as though they were hand in hand. The sheep obviously enjoys this special attention from the shepherd and revels in the close, personal, intimate contact between them. To be treated in this special way by the shepherd is to know comfort in a deep dimension. So shepherds will use their crook not just to direct, but simply just to remind, I'm here, don't worry, I've got you. So that when we're in this valley, that sheep that might be petrified otherwise is comforted simply by feeling God's hand there, the shepherd's hand there, and we can be the same. God doesn't just speak to us through his word alone. We can feel his guidance, we can feel his presence, and it's something we can attune ourselves more to. And that's what takes me on to just another bit. When I was reading this, I went to Ezekiel. And there's a passage in Ezekiel that's all about shepherds and shepherding. And the context of this extract is Jerusalem has fallen. And it's been taken over by the Babylonians. And the Jewish people left behind are all feeling really scattered and they're really lost. And they feel like all the people that have been guiding them around have been pretty hopeless. They've not guided them very well. They've been pretty poor shepherds. And then we get to this extract, which I have printed here. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against the shepherds and will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending the flock so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths and it will no longer be food for them. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. I love that line. I myself will do it. God doesn't just appoint people to go and stand in his place. He takes personal accountability. When we are facing suffering, when we are facing these dark valleys, God says, no, I am with you myself. I am there. Yes, there's people around you. There's influences all around the world that will steer you in the wrong path. And as John spoke earlier, there's lots and lots of that in our culture. Lots of things that will try and pretend that it's a good guide and will steer us away from the path that God knows is best for us. But God gets involved himself. He is there with us by his side and reminds us of his presence using this. And he can guide and he can steer us. So that's the first point I wanted to to make there. But then how does he do this? How do we feel his guidance? What does that look like? How was he involved? And that takes me to John 14, verses 16 to 17. Because it's through the Holy Spirit. John says this. I don't think I gave a slide for this one, don't I? And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. The world cannot accept him because it neither sees him nor knows him. But you know him, for he lives with you and will be in you. So God sends us a personal advocate who is there. And I love the line, the world won't accept him because it doesn't see him or know him. Sometimes when we say to people, actually, I'm facing this situation, but I've been praying about it and now I feel better. People will say, oh, you're just kind of kidding yourself into thinking that. Because they don't see God's hand. But that doesn't mean that we can't feel it, that it's there. That we can't have this reminder from the shepherd that God is there by our side. Just tapping us with that staff, reminding us that he's there and showing us the right paths. So, let's go on a little bit further. But this is where I want to go back to my Duke of Edinburgh story, because there's a second part to it. Second part, so strap in. So, about an hour later, I'd been sat, probably napped again, but out on the little rest stop where we were waiting for the next little meeting point. And these kids, we could see their tracker moving to us. And about an hour later, they get to us, and we say, "Oh, how was that next leg of your journey?" And Brian says, "Oh, it was great." And I thought, how exciting can walking through a field in Turvey really be? It looked a little bit, he seemed too excited. So, what do you mean? What happened? He said, "Oh, look at this, sir." And he gets his GoPro out, so that little small portable camera that they're allowed to take with them because it doesn't have internet. And he showed me the footage. And this farmer, rather than just walk them out of the field and stay with them, instead said, "Wait, okay, just wait there." He brings his flatbed, his truck along, climbs them all, gets them all on the back of this thing, and drove them all the way out of the field to the next checkpoint. And we had this video of Brian with his head over the sides going, "Ah, this is great!" having the best time of his life. But, so we had to tell them, like, "You tell no one of this." Because if you've ever done DV, you will know you're not allowed to get a lift. It voids it. So technically, they should never have achieved their DV. We're going to pretend like, no, this doesn't go further than this room. Doesn't go further. So this farmer just gave them a lift. But then we could say, well, hang on, what did these kids learn from that? Have they learned how to face their fears when they're in the field and getting past the cows? Well, no, they haven't. Because instead, the farmer's just given them a lift. He's given them a shortcut. But that's not what Psalm 23 says. Psalm 23 says, "I walk through the valley." We've got to do it. God's not there to carry us out of it. He doesn't promise an escape route. Instead, he promises support along the way. And that's why I'll say this. God guides us through our suffering. Guides us through it. Doesn't just lift us out of it. Guides us through it. Even though I walk. A shepherd's job is not to carry his sheep from A to B. A shepherd's job is to assist his sheep from A to B. And there's a difference there. So if we are facing fear and we're expecting God to just wave a magic wand and make it all go away, that's not a reasonable expectation to have. But what we can do is we can expect for him to provide comfort, to remind us that actually, I'm with you and I've got authority over all this stuff. You've got nothing to fear while I'm with you. Now what that means is, let me jump back a little bit. The shepherd knows the route through the valley. While you're in a valley, you don't know the way out. Sheep don't have a map, do they? They've got no idea where they're headed. I should probably put this down, I'm fiddling with it. But sheep don't have a map. They've got no idea where they're headed. But the shepherd knows exactly what's at the end of this. And earlier in the psalm it says, God leads us to green pastures. So when we're in this valley, God knows that if you follow that route and you keep it going, there will be that green pasture at the end. There's hope in that. The hope's in the destination, and that we've got someone with us who can steer us to it. No matter what we're going through, while we don't have the map, while we don't know how many more valleys we're going to have to get through between now and when we get to that green pasture, we can be confident that is there at the end of it. Because our shepherd has the map and he sees the way out. So as long as we follow his guidance, we can be sure, we can be confident that his comfort, that his peace, that all of the good things that God brings us is right there at the end of it. But we're going to have to walk through it first. So, but this is what, though, takes me forward. Because when I was given this quote, this verse for Psalm 23, I remember thinking, like, oh, that's not an easy one, talking about suffering. I was hoping for one of the ones a bit earlier on. I thought, yeah, I can manage that. But I was given this one. I thought, oh, that's rough. And I also thought, I've heard many people speak on Psalm 23 who've been through much deeper valleys than I have. And I thought, who am I as someone who hasn't had to face death myself, especially? I've had quite a fortunate life in that, quite a blessed life, really. Who am I to start talking about what it's like to be fearless in a valley when I've not been tested anywhere near the level that many people in this room will have done? But what qualifies me to stand here and speak about it? But then that's what got me thinking about it, because yes, those deep and dark valleys come along, but that doesn't mean that we don't face ordinary valleys along the way. That actually the small things can be just as frightening. And that's because valleys, they can be relative. What seems to be a deep and a dark valley for me might not be for somebody else. They can be relative. So, for example, today I'm here preaching at the church, but my mum was here in the morning cleaning the toilets. This seems a lot more nicer an option for me than that does. That seems like a much darker valley. It's a relative term. But the thing that makes the difference when it comes to our suffering and the challenges that we go through, it's not objective. It's not, oh, well, this thing is much a bigger suffering or much a scarier thing than this. Instead, no. Our valleys are where we don't see God. And that can be anywhere. We can all have blind spots. And our darkest valleys are where we don't see God, where we don't see his presence, where we don't look for and feel that guidance. And if we don't see God, anything, no matter how small it might seem, can suddenly start feeling really big and really frightening. And it got me thinking to last year. So last summer, I had August off, best time to be a teacher. And while I was in that time, I remember thinking, I'd had a really, really difficult first couple of years. I struggled a lot with just the stress and the pressure of it. And it really got to me. And full transparency, there were moments where I had panic attacks behind my desk in the morning, and I had my head of department in there kind of looking a bit panicked herself, thinking, what's going on? And I ended up, there was a phase where I went the GP route. I had antidepressants for a bit, and then cold turkeyed it a new day, not a good idea. And so it was rough. But in that summer of last year, there was something that I felt very convicted of. And it was partly while I was preparing my last preach, which was in August then. And it was that, have I invited God into that bit of my life? Am I creating a darker valley because I've got a blind spot to him while I'm at work? And I realised that's what was going on. And I'd heard other teachers as well. Like, for instance, Joyce once shared how she was praying over her students' chairs before every lesson. And I heard that and I thought, okay, maybe that's what I'm missing here. I need to be bringing God into my work life. Because outside of that, I invite him in a lot, I'd say. When I'm facing challenges outside of work, I can lean on God in that and it helps me feel fearless, helps me feel comforted. But at work, it's like I'd missed that. It was a blind spot. So I spent summer, I think, praying about it and I'm asking God, right, what do I do here? And really, I didn't feel much clearer as to what I should do, even when we got back in September. But then this is what happened. On the very first day the kids came back, I was in my room at about 8 o'clock in the morning. And one of my colleagues came down to my room and he knocked on the door and he said, "Hi, Tom, sorry it's busy time, but English isn't my first language. I hope I'm clear here. I don't really know what I want to say, but I'm feeling like I've not got a spiritual part of my work life. And I feel like that's what's missing, and I felt like I needed to talk to you about it." Now, I remember being there thinking like, yeah, I know what you mean, actually. Yeah, I do. English is fine. I know exactly what you mean. And we spent that first term, every morning, he would come to my room at 8:15, so I couldn't even forget. It was great. He came to me. We would each pray, and then we'd do the Lord's Prayer together. Now, he was Catholic, so his Lord's Prayer is a bit shorter. I've got the extended edition. But he even learned the extended one for me, so we'd do it together. And then we'd go off to our morning meeting, whatever it would be. And the difference that made was massive. But then he had a baby, and selfishly he took paternity leave. and he was gone. And I thought, oh, God answered prayer so visibly. When I think back in my life of when has God answered prayer, that ranks quite highly as one of the most just clear and obvious. But then he took it away, and it was as if God said, here's proof of concept. You need this, and it makes a difference. Now it's over to you. And it's tricky, and there will be points when I forget this. But one of the things that I've found has been useful is seeking community, lent into the church a little bit more. So if I find where my next set of bullet points are, there we are. So what I've learned through that experience, I feel like I've learned a bit more about how we can be fearless. So the first thing we need to do is we need to identify where our blind spots are. Mine was work, still is to a degree. I can't stand here and claim to be perfect. There's still a blind spot there. Work. I prayed about it, God convicted me in it. And then step 2, pray about it. Ask God for his guidance. Because when I asked, funnily enough, it appeared. It was unbelievable. But third, we need to seek Christian fellowship. Because one of the key things that I always felt convicted of, I'd spent my first, however many years I've been here, a long time at church, and I'd never been in a community group. I'd always kind of resisted that. Thought, I don't want to be singing in a living room. I'm all right. And so I avoided it. And then it got to the beginning of September, and I thought, right, I need to change this. If I'm going to invite God into my work life, I need to invite him a bit more beyond a Sunday as well. So I signed up for a community group. I'm in the one that meets in Biggleswade. And I spoke to my people in that group about this, about the troubles I had at work, and people prayed about it and catch up with me sometimes when it gets to a Sunday. And actually their involvement, their checking in, reminds me of God's presence in that too. Because we are God's hands and feet. We can help each other to feel God's presence in a situation. And that's what my community group does. Luke puts a message in the group chat saying, well, we're praying for so-and-so today. It pops up on my phone, usually in the morning when I'm at my desk. And it's a little reminder of, that God's working outside as well. Yes, I'm in my classroom, but I can invite him in there. Having that community group's been a game changer. And interestingly, I think this is where God's got a sense of humour. When I was preparing for this, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to talk about challenge at work, how I can be fearless there, how I've improved. On Monday, teachers will know where I'm going with this, we get an email. And it says, right, all staff, can you meet in the library at break time? Which was in an hour. Now we're thinking, we know what this is, so we go to the library. And they say, our friends at Ofsted have just called us. Oh. And it had a bit of an air of don't panic, Mr. Mannering to it. But it's saying, well, Ofsted's going to be here, and they're going to be here Tuesday and Wednesday. And straight away I was thinking, oh no, this sounds awful. And yet it was such a strange atmosphere. Teachers were nervous, saw one person crying in our little photocopy room. Because the pressure is massive. The pressure's huge. And yet my first port of call this time around wasn't panic. I went to my community group chat, and I put a little thing in there saying, right, we got the alarm. Can I have some prayer for this, please? 12 months ago, I don't know if that would have been my first response. Might have been, it would have appeared somewhere, but it would have been quite low down the list. But then something God's taught me through this is, if I'm going to feel fearless, if I'm going to face that, I need to involve him a little bit sooner. I need to seek his guidance. Because without seeking his guidance, without feeling this at my side, it's going to feel a lot worse. I can create a valley that's darker than it needs to be, is what I've learned there. So we need to identify our blind spots, pray, and seek Christian fellowship. The last example I'll give of that last one. On that first Monday night, just to prove how we can help each other feel God's presence in this, I got a phone call about 10 o'clock from Callum and Divya, if we know them. Some of my dearest friends on the planet, and they said, right, we're going to be at your house in 10 minutes. And I go out to up the driveway and open the door, and they brought a little Ofsted care package. So I had some, ready. Mr. Kipling, blueberry muffin breakfast things, because they knew I was going to be in early, some saurine strawberry lunch loaves, and some chocolate chip brioche, and in a package. And they brought that along for me, and they said, right, when you're at work, don't forget to eat, have breakfast in the morning, even if you're in early. I ended up sharing those, funnily enough, with the same guy who'd come to pray with me every morning. And it was a little boost for us all when it got in, both in the morning and when we were still there at work at 8 o'clock in the evening, doing all the paperwork we have to do for Ofsted. But anyway, they helped me feel God's presence in that moment. And something Divya said in the car, she said, pray about this. We're praying for you, you need to pray as well. And I did. And Callum said, but don't worry, at least it's all preach material. And he was right. So by going through all of that, they helped me to feel God's presence in that moment. Now, again, I can't claim that I've faced Ofsted without fear. There were moments where I certainly did. But what it's proven to me is feeling God's presence works. When we're in that dark valley, that's where our fearlessness and our comfort can come from. It's not big talk. It's effective. But then, of course, when we look at the verse, and I love the King James translation, it says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, it makes our valleys seem a lot worse. That sounds like it's the sort of place that Frodo would walk through on the way to Mordor. And when I look at the valley of the shadow of death, I don't think Ofsted. I think of things that seem bigger, when we're faced with death. And again, I've not experienced that yet. However, when I look around the room, and by seeking Christian fellowship, I've seen examples of what that fearlessness looks like. Now, actually, Judith spoke earlier about Mark and his journey with cancer. Now, Mark's a legend. In the summer, he runs the setup team for New Day, where he's responsible for all the plumbing and all the electrics. And he brought me along on his team last year, and he's having me again, so I've not ruined anything too much. Thank you, Mark. And there was one point where he was catching up with lots of the people he'd not seen for a number of months, and we were walking down through the campsite, all in our high-vis jackets. And he was catching up about his cancer with some of the people he'd not seen for a while. And what's remarkable about Mark is he can talk about his cancer in the most blunt, matter-of-fact way. And he talks about it the same way I'd talk about it if I'd stubbed my toe in the morning. Like it's no big deal. He's so blunt about it. It's wonderful. And he said something to this effect. He said, well, the way I see it is, God will either heal me, either through a miracle or through providing me with doctors, or he'll take me home. Neither of those seems too bad. So his hope, his comfort, is that in God's presence, he knows there's green pastures at the end. Now, I heard this. It was a very flippant comment. He wasn't stood on a stage trying to be impactful. And I was just trailing along behind him. But it stuck with me right through till now. And I imagine it'll stick with me a lot further. Because I thought, right, there's an example of what fearlessness in a really deep valley can look like. And how that comes from feeling God's presence with us. So, I'm going to take it. That's my alarm to say I've run out of time. Ollie's shaking his head. Right, so... that sounded a bit urgent, didn't it? Right, for those of you listening online, it was like an air raid siren. But anyway, right. So, I think what we'll do, because just before we wrap up, I think over the last couple of weeks we've read Psalm 23 together. I've quite enjoyed doing that. I'd like to do that again, and then I'm going to hand over to Felix, who's going to pray for us. So, should we get Psalm 23 up? I'm going to read it from the screen because this is too small. You can stand if you choose. I won't insist. Okay. So, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid. For you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect me and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever.
Thanks for joining us. For more information, visit woodsidechurch.com or follow us on social media.